Thank you, Lisa. And our final speaker for the afternoon is Jennifer Preston. And I haven't met you, Jennifer. There you are. Jennifer currently works on the patient and public involvement at the University of Liverpool, where her main role is to deliver a strategy to engage children, young people, and families in pediatric health research in the UK and internationally. One of her current projects is a young person's advisory group called Generation R that has enabled hundreds of young people to participate in research, design, and delivery. With the launch of our clinical network, which includes an equal number of pediatric and adult sites, I'm thrilled that she'll be talking to us today about involving young patients in the design and delivery of pediatric drug development. Lisa, Jennifer.
I'd like to thank the organisers for inviting me today. It's been a great journey so far from Liverpool. So hopefully you enjoy my presentation. And this is just a few slides, just sort of like giving you the journey of where I've come from, sort of like developing a strategy for involving young people and families in the design of clinical trials. So, as my title suggests, it's quite a long title. It basically means just to set up a strategy to involve children and young people and families affected by various conditions. And I was employed by, this was in 2005, by what was the NIHR, so the National Institute for Health Research, Medicines for Children's Research Network. It's slightly changed in its structure now, but I still deliver on patient involvement within various structures and across Europe. But first, before I go into the detail of where I've come from, I want to just introduce you to a few little people that I actually work with, or not so little in this case. Oh, what have I done? Oh, there we go. So this is Luke. He was born with a congenital heart defect, and at the age of 2 weeks old, he had his first open heart surgery. By the time he was 12, he'd had 8 open heart surgeries, and he's on a various pack of medications, a bit similar to what Lisa's just highlighted what her daughter was on. Luke's on about 20 medications a day to keep him alive. But Luke is an absolute star. He actually raises quite a lot of money for our local charity, our local hospital, Alder Hey in Liverpool. But he's been through quite a difficult journey so far. This is Sophie. So Sophie came to me about 5 years ago. She was diagnosed at 14 with a condition called lupus. So it affects her immune system. She was an A-star student at school, very popular, loved school, until she got this condition, and it took a while for it to be diagnosed. And Sophie was so frustrated about how she was treated in schools because of her diagnosis. Because looking at Sophie, although there's various stages where she obviously is on some form of medication and steroids to keep her well, she's a happy-go-lucky child and young person, and all of a sudden she was faced with this condition that affected her life completely. She was going to school and she had fatigue, and those who have ever met a young person with lupus and struggles on a daily basis with fatigue, she seriously could not do the likes of physical education, activities, any of what sort. But because she looks healthy, she was, the teachers couldn't handle, they thought she was lying, she was trying to just get off school, which is quite unusual for Sophie, and but there was just no support within her school life to help her get through this condition. And then we meet Simon. So Simon, he was diagnosed at 3 with juvenile arthritis, and he's got Crohn's, he's got a multitude of conditions. And he came to me because they all wanted to do something to help other young people, but also to help themselves and to learn more about their conditions, but also how could they involve and help other young people going through what similar things to what they were going through. But these are just some of the 3 inspirational people that I've met over my journey over the last 14 years. But what they all have in common is that they are taking a multitude of drugs that are either 50% off license or off label, so that they haven't been tested in children and young people. And in neonates, it's 90%. So the evidence base for children's paediatric trials was lacking somewhat when I first came on board in 2005. But it's still at this stage now where we're still working with, children are still taking medicines that are not licensed for them to take. There's no evidence base for them to be taking that medicine. And that's partly due to two reasons. It was mainly for ethical reasons many years ago, especially even when I first started in 2005. It was unethical, or it was seemed unethical to actually do paediatric trials. And the other issue was that there was lack of investment in paediatric trials because of that image that it wasn't good to do. It's now unethical not to do paediatric trials. And this has all stemmed from the paediatric regulation that was introduced in 2007. And it was the infrastructure in the UK, especially to deliver clinical trials in medicines for children, that has started to see, you'll see on the chart on the right, from 2008, the slow rise of paediatric trials because of those initiatives, because of the paediatric regulation, because of the infrastructure in the UK and now wider, that it's absolutely crucial that we find that evidence base for medicines for children. But scarily, this was a survey that was done with the general public. This was last year with 2,000 people, and 58% incorrectly thought that children are not allowed to participate in clinical trials, which is quite scary, really, because after all the work that we've done, that if you asked anyone on the street about paediatric trials, they don't think it should happen. It's not something that should happen. It's not common, and they certainly wouldn't want their children to be taking part in a trial, which is quite scary. So for us, there's a long way to go still. We've got a lot of work to do, and working with our patients is the only way that we can actually to overcome these hurdles. I feel there's quite a disconnect between health research and actual health care. And that is, if I was to say to my mum, what I do in my job, she's horrified every time I talk about clinical trials. She's it's guinea pigs, it's people in white coats, and yet she's on a series of tablets and medications, and I always say to her, where do you think your tablets came from? Who do you think actually went through those clinical trials before? And so those are the conversations that I have on a daily basis, because people are they don't connect that research impacts upon their care. And an interesting experience I had recently, I was in an outpatients ward, and there was two women who obviously waiting for an appointment to go in and see their doctor. And one of them said, "Isn't it amazing what they can do now? I've just had this surgery, I've just done this, I've just had this done." And I was just sitting there, and I just wanted to have a conversation with her to say, well, if it wasn't for the research that had gone on for the last 50 years maybe in this centre, you wouldn't be getting that care now. But having that conversation is quite a difficult one. But I also think there's a major disconnect between healthcare research, healthcare, and actual patient involvement. And this is what I've been trying to do, and what we've heard today is, if you get those two right, then hopefully you're going to create better trials and better awareness about trials, so that young people and families want to take part. So it was already mentioned in one of the presentations that in the UK especially, we've got organisations such as Involve who are who promote and support researchers to work with patients and the public. And it's a fantastic organisation. But when I started in 2005, there was very, very limited information on how to involve young people in trials. And it was the guidance at the time was mainly to involve your white, middle class, possibly retired patients. And you had that one token patient on an adult committee. And I came on board, and I've got no experience. I've got no medical experience, no medical background whatsoever. And my background's in social policy. It's about working with adults and getting them back into training and to work. So it was a complete minefield for me to actually come on board to this structure. And quite, you're dealing with professors who'd never worked with, you'd think that they'd never worked with a patient in their life, and they expected for the young people especially to fit in their model of engagement and involvement, and that just wasn't going to work with me. But again, the big shift in the UK especially is that even the regulators are now on board. The regulators are now stipulating that patients should be involved at every stage of the design and the development of the research, and that's stipulated in their ethics guidelines and applications. As you can see from this question here, so I was a lay member on an ethics committee for 10 years, and this question drove me absolutely mental, because it asks how the researchers have involved patients and at what stage. And I'd say 95% of that question wasn't answered correctly. It was, the justification was, they're involving them in the research. Well, that's not involvement, that's not engagement. So it was a tick box exercise. Whereas now the regulators are now saying, well, if that isn't answered correctly, we will come back to you and we'll expect you to be doing patient involvement, especially if you've got consent forms and information sheets that are not appropriate for the target audience or target group that you're going to be working with. So in 2005, I was challenged with setting up a strategy to involve young people. And again, because of my no medicine background, I thought, how am I going to do this? And children, according to my directors and our organisation, was, children are going to have to be central to everything that we do. But their voice is not enough. So if we followed the UN Convention of the Rights of the Child, and they say you've got to give them a voice to be, and give them space to be involved, it's much more than just giving them a voice. It's much more, you've got to listen to them, you've got to act upon that. So I love this model developed by Professor Lundy in Ireland, which goes through, you provide young people with the space to be, and this applies to maybe any patient. You give them a space to be allowed to have a voice. They're allowed to influence that research, and therefore then you're given more weight to other audiences as well. So I quite like this approach. So in 2005, these are just a few of my young people who were part of the Young Persons Advisory Group that I set up. So in 2006, after a lot of soul searching and a lot of trying to work out how best place could we put our young people, where are we going to put our young people at the centre of everything that we do. So I set up a pilot Young Persons Advisory Group to see if we could work together with young people and with researchers to design the research. So because we were working with medicines for children, it could be any medicines for children. So we didn't know who to involve, so we just opened up this Young Persons Advisory Group for any young person from whatever age, I suppose up to 18 at the time we were thinking, who maybe have taken part in a clinical trial, they've got a chronic condition, or they just might just have a genuine interest in health science or research. So we targeted schools, we targeted clinics, we targeted hospitals. And the first young patient that came to me, she was an 8-year-old who was taking part in a leukemia trial. And she was really, really annoyed at the fact of the information that she'd received, or, I suppose, lack of information because she was only 8. And she was really annoyed by that and she wanted to give voice to other young people who wouldn't have to go through that experience. And she felt outside of the whole experience of being part of the clinical trial. She felt, even though her mum and dad they were fantastic at bringing her in on the decision-making process to be part of that trial, she still felt outside and wanted her own voice. So this 8-year-old then sort of developed my model to say, okay, well, we started at 7, 8-year-olds plus. We recruited about 7 young people at the time. And it was I'd say a 3-year pilot. It was quite a long pilot because it was a long process to find out how young people wanted to work with us, what did they want to learn, how are we going to teach them in a way that was understandable, when did they want to meet, so did they want to meet on an evening, did they want to meet on a weekend. The young people developed all of these. So we meet on a Saturday, We meet for 4 or 5 hours, and we get researchers to come to the groups on a monthly basis. And they're the ones who actually change the process as we're going along. So Adit, for example, on the end, the only male there, he's really passionate, and he's just started university in London to become a doctor, and he's going to be a most amazing doctor ever because of he's had 8 years experience working with our young persons group, and he's so passionate, and he didn't speak a word when he first started the group, and his confidence, and Lisa's just mentioned it in terms of, incentives to be part of such groups, is not just about money, because we don't pay them a lot of money, we give them vouchers, but we don't pay them a lot to spend a full Saturday with us every 6 weeks. It's more about he feels as if he's contributing to the health of children, and the projects that he's been involved in is amazing, and he wants to be going to paediatrics, and he's going to be a fantastic doctor, as are some of them, not all of them. But it just shows that this model can work, but it was a steep learning curve. And I think to work with young people, you do need a skilled facilitator. You need your team support. I do get annoyed when people say on a daily basis, oh, I'd love to set up a young persons group because it seems so easy. And the first question I ask is, well, why? Do you have the resource? Do you have the team? Do you have, a terms of reference? Do you know exactly what you want from young people? Do you have a training plan, and do you have a support program in place? Are you going to evaluate those activities? And more importantly, are you going to feed back to them what's happened as a result? And I think, again, that's one of my biggest learning curves as well with our young people, in that they said to us, why aren't the researchers feeding back what's happened as a result of our input? So we make sure that that's in the terms of reference to researchers who come to us, and we say, right, this is an agreement. Our young people want feedback as to what happens as a result of their participation. And if that doesn't happen, they will be, that's a constant chasing of researchers to do that. But, we're fortunate that researchers do provide that feedback. So the model that we had in Liverpool is now global. We've got many groups across internationally, and it's growing as we speak. So I'm a founder of Whyparknet, which stands for the European Young Persons Advisory Group Network. So I'm working on a European project at the minute, working with 20 countries. So I'm trying to embed a strategy to involve young people and families in those countries. So we've set up a European network to bring together young people's advisory groups across Europe, and working with the International Children's Advisory Group Network, which I helped set up in several years ago. And on a yearly basis, they bring all of these teams together in a summit. We're in Kansas City this year, but unfortunately I can't go. But we were in Edinburgh last year, Florida the year before, and it's a fantastic summit to bring all the young people from across the globe together to feed into the research agenda for child health. So this is the Lundy model. You can't really see the wording of it, but we try to abide by this type of model for our young persons advisory group. We've created the space, and we're constantly learning on a daily, weekly basis on how to improve, how we can give young people more of a voice and more influence, and therefore it means working with that, and how the views are communicated. So I'm just going to give you some examples of some of the activities that our young people have been involved in over the years. And one of our biggest activities that we've been involved in is looking at informed consent forms. Now, this was a one page of a 20-page document that was aimed at 8-year-olds. And we looked at this, and we constantly see this type of information. So over the last 14 years, I'd say we've reviewed about 200 patient information sheets, and I'd say 90% of those are looking like this type of patient information sheets aimed at young people. And it predominantly is industry-sponsored trials that abide by this type of template, which we've been trying to work with our industry colleagues to stop this from happening. But our young people just don't like to read these patient information sheets. As you can see, this is a type of information that you're expecting a child to have at least an informed decision to take part in a trial. And although the patient information sheet is just part of the process, this is what they're faced with and therefore feel outside of the decision-making process when actually they should be given a voice and be allowed to take part in that trial. So over the years, we developed some guidance. So this is our young person advisory group guidance that they developed. And it was after maybe seeing about 100 patient information sheets that looked like the one you've just seen. And they said, well, why are we seeing this type of information? This is what we want. This is what we don't want to see. And so it tended to be things like, somebody mentioned it before, we don't know what ethics is. We don't really care whether it's gone to an ethics committee. We assume that it's gone to an ethics committee, even if we don't really fully understand what that is. We don't want to know who's sponsored. Who sponsored the study. We don't want to know, you know, I'm trying to see what my writing is. It was things like, so especially the introduction, it's, you were being invited to take part in this research process, and then 3 pages in, you're still talking about what is a research study. The young people wanted to know, how is it going to impact my life? What are the procedures that I need to take part? How much time do I need to take off school? What are the side effects? What's the benefits of taking part? And that's all in the guidance, but actually what researchers do is they look at the guidance and they think they have to include anything and everything into that patient information sheet. And they're actually scared that they're going to be sued. So they just throw everything into that patient information sheet, and it's just not fit for purpose. So we've done quite a lot of work with our young persons group. But the interesting thing is until we started working with the regulators, we didn't have much impact. We were still seeing these patient information sheets coming to us. And so it's took a long time. And now that we do training 3 times, 4 times a year with research ethics members and researchers who come together and we develop, we teach them about what young people want and what they don't want. And what's scary is that some research ethics members don't fully appreciate why children's research happens. And so they could be the blockers of research coming through the system, which is quite scary, really. So we've done a lot of work, but this picture at the bottom is a project that I've been working on for the last 3 years, and it's called Trials Engagement with Children and Adolescents. And it's basically looking at developing multimedia interventions to not replace the patient information sheet, but to complement the patient information sheet. So this project looked at how we can improve recruitment to trials and retention in trials through the information that we provide to children and young people and families. And so the young people have been involved right from day one in the development of the multimedia intervention, so the little figures and the types of information that they wanted to be included in these multimedia interventions. So it's took several years, but now what's happened, so we've done all the user testing, we've done all the qualitative work. What do young people want? What do the researchers want? What do the healthcare professionals want? We've put that into some templates, and now we've nested that onto 6 clinical trials in the UK to do a comparison between the multimedia intervention and the patient information sheet. So some trials will just get the paper copy, and some trials will get the multimedia intervention, and some trials will get both. And then the questionnaire will be asked of young people and families about their level of understanding of what's expected of them in the trial once they're in the trial, and whether that impacts upon the recruitment and retention. So this is a little video about the importance of that happening. Oh. Can somebody press? Got to go back. No, it's
Today is the first
no,
ever
it's the wrong
World
one.
Young
You've gone forward. It's the wrong one. You need to go back a few slides. Yeah. Give my slides away. There you go.
Trials. To improve communication for patients, more reliable management of data, and a simpler process for the trial team. Paper-based systems need to be upgraded. Hard copies passed between researchers and patients can be misplaced. Technical language can be confusing, and not everyone can read. Elsewhere, we choose how we receive information, different media for different messages. Watch, listen and read on different devices, and sign up for things digitally. If digital is secure enough for our banks, it is for our research too. Our team at the University of Oxford are working with a company called Morph to make trials digital, simplifying the process with one central trial website, using animation and video to explain patient information, bringing screening and consent online to achieve paperless data collection. Direct feeds to the website dashboard show live recruitment data. The trial team log in to access key documents and communicate with patients by email, managing the complete process online. We are improving research by making trials digital.
So the science study is one of the studies that I'm a co-investigator on, and he's fantastic. I told him of the Trekker study and the multimedia intervention, and he went straight directly to the team and said, I want this, because he's so the young people want everything digital. They tell us this on a daily basis, but until it had money attached to it in a study, and hopefully the evidence base over these 6 trials, then it's been quite difficult to do. So this is a paper that I co-authored based on the first phase of the Trekker study, and it looks about what young people, healthcare professionals and researchers want in the information. So have a look at this, but some of the findings. So it was interesting because on this side, the young person's advisory requirements over the years has been, how long is the study going to take, what the aim of the study is, what we'll have to do, and do we have a choice, is the study safe? But then the Trekker findings actually just complemented those findings, which was great for me because it was just qualitative evidence with a much wider group of young people to say, this is what we want, what is involved if I participate, time away from school. And and some of the recruitment issues that we've faced over the last 14 years is you'll get recruitment up, you'll get your recruitment in, and then it's the retention that's the biggest problem, because they hadn't realised the extent of the procedures included in the study. And that's because that was mostly on the page 10 of the patient information sheet, and it's a lot to take in when you've got a child who's just been diagnosed with a particular condition, and then you go home with this information sheet and it's just all too overwhelming. So the retention rates in paediatric trials are quite the low. So young people want to know, what is the trial testing, and that's really quite important. So in terms of what's the difference between the trial and the care that I'm going to, so what's the standard care and what's the trial? What difference, what's the added procedures involved in that trial? They want that to be clear. So what will I get if I don't participate in this trial? So if I feel pressured in saying yes to taking part in a trial, and then come away and think, yeah, but what is my normal standard of care? That should be clearly explained in the patient information sheet and the consultation. What are the risks? Now, there's always going to be risks. There's not always going to be possible benefits, but that needs to be clear in terms of what are the potential benefits, but if it's not for the child, what are the potential benefits for other children? Confidentiality, and again, this was an interesting finding from Trekker, is that they assumed that this would just automatically be in place, instead of reading 3 pages of how their data is going to be stored. So information about payments was not required, they felt. They felt that was a bit of an incentive and it shouldn't be, And in the UK, we can't offer payments for young people to take part in trials. the option to leave a trial, what are the options? And then, like I say, other choices, what are the alternatives if I don't say yes to this trial? This was, so we've seen quite a lot of progress being made over a number of years, and these are the type of patient information sheets our young people want to see. So, and it's all dependent on the trial and the level, the reading age. And in the UK, I don't know what it's like for the Canada, but you've got 3 different age groups. And what our young people say as well is that this might seem quite childish to a 12 to a 15-year-old. It's not a one-size-fits-all, but at least if you've got several age groups, then we can accommodate as much as we can. But this information, it's the same information that you've seen in the patient information sheets I shared with you with all the text, but it's just in a format that the young people want. And this was designed by our young people. So they came and they critiqued as they do. And this is the type of information sheet that they felt that they would read and feel empowered to take part in the trial if they were given this information. So another strategy that I've been doing is working with industry, and industry come to us with templates very similar to the first patient information sheets I showed you. And they came to the group because they felt that they had a fantastic paediatric template to be used. And again, the young people just didn't like the template. They felt it was too childish or too patronising, so they completely changed it. So this is a paper that I co-authored with GW Pharma to explain what strategies that they're now using based on the template that was developed by the Young Persons Advisory Group. But we haven't just focused in on patient information sheets, although that's been quite a big role of the Young Persons Advisory Group. We're really, really keen to make sure that we get involved in the protocol development. So, and for those of you who've ever worked and read protocols, you can't bring a 300-page protocol to a young person's advisory group or a parent group for that matter. So we had to work with the company on how could we get the company to come to us on a phase 4 trial, looking at eczema and in a way that was child-friendly. So it took us about 4 or 5 months to actually develop an activity for the young people, because it was just totally out of the comfort zone of the sponsor to come to a group of young people especially. They were absolutely petrified to come to the group. And I think they just didn't have any expectations of what the group would ask, what questions they would ask, or whether they'd be able to contribute. I just didn't think this scientist who was the head of this research, came to the group and he just didn't know what to expect. So what they wanted from the young people was to look at the review of scheduled assessments, look at the possible adverse events, and obviously look into the review of the patient information sheet. And I'll have to refer to my notes to this one because the young people, it was fascinating because, so this clinician never worked with patients before, and more importantly, he had never worked with young people. So he came, and this was a study looking at a mild form of eczema, and it was a new product, looking at a new cream, and it was looking at things like, what the flare rate was, how often to use this cream, what were parents' and patients' understandings of what a flare meant. And so this was, so they'd gone through the science, and these were some of the questions that our young people asked, and I think the clinician was just gobsmacked. He just couldn't believe that these questions were coming from young people as young as 8. So does this cream affect your immune system? Is the treatment autoimmune? Does the treatment, this is a funny one, does the treatment inhibit cytokines or destroy them? How did you decide an 85% as a target of subjects aged between 2 and 17 years old? How many patients will participate in the study? How will you assess if the treatments that you're going to be used are used appropriately? I think, but the biggest thing was, there's about 15 more questions, to be fair, but I won't go into it. But there's one of the questions was, why are you expecting a child as young as 2 to have monthly blood draws for a mild case of eczema? Now, I've got a granddaughter who's 3 and she's got mild eczema, and I wouldn't let my granddaughter take part in this trial based on the monthly blood draws that they were expecting them to be part of, when there was absolute no reason why they were having monthly blood draws. And then therefore, you know, if that was, they took it out, they did review that, and because the parents felt exactly the same, they wouldn't get the recruitment, and they certainly wouldn't get the retention, because trying to get a blood off a 2-year-old is quite difficult for those of you in the room who know that. So these were the type of insights that this company went away with and changed their protocols as a result of the young people's involvement. So it's fantastic that, you know, we have the opportunity to work with pharmaceutical companies and academic researchers to do these type of things. So this, hopefully, is another video. And this is more about, so it goes back to the disconnect I was talking to you about in terms of we need to raise awareness of research still. After 14 years, we still need to raise awareness. We still need to engage with members of the public about research. And this is an example of an engagement project recently led by young people and families across the world suffering with rheumatology conditions, because the general public don't think young people have rheumatology conditions like juvenile arthritis or lupus, those type of conditions. So parents, young people, researchers, healthcare professionals got together to develop this big day to promote why it's important that we do research in rheumatology conditions in children. Thank you.
Today is the first ever World Young Rheumatic Disease Day, Word Day. Did you know that kids get rheumatic diseases like
juvenile idiopathic arthritis?
My name's Charlotte. I got diagnosed when I was 3 and it affects my joints and my life basically. And you could be at school and you could be in so much pain, but yet no one understands it because no one can see it, and it's horrible.
Vasculitis, juvenile dermatomyositis, lupus.
These conditions aren't easy to diagnose. The symptoms can include joint pain, joint swelling, rashes, muscle weakness, fever, weight loss, hair loss, and problems with the blood and internal organs.
I'm Bridget, I'm 14 and I have mixed connective tissue disease. I've been under Alder-Hey for about 4 years now. So I was diagnosed when I was around 9 years old. And it took a long time for me to get diagnosed because they thought it was many different things to start with. Even after I got diagnosed, it took a long time for them to find the right medication. I tried many different ones, yeah. Now, because the medication I'm on works and it's good and it's working for me, it means I can start to join in with my friends when they do sports, and I like to bake a lot, so that's good. I can do a lot of baking, and I like to hang out with my friends and try and do normal things now.
Alder-Hey have a team of doctors, nurses, physiotherapists, occupational therapists and psychologists who specialise in diagnosing and treating these illnesses.
In partnership with the first and only experimental arthritis treatment centre for children, groundbreaking research is being carried out at Alder-Hey into these conditions.
This is an autoimmune disease in which the immune system is overactive, so it attacks healthy tissue that suffer from extreme fatigue, joint pain, muscle weakness, nausea, breathing problems, all of which have a huge impact on my day-to-day life. So I had the opportunity to take part in a lot of research, which is something that I think is really important in bettering the treatment of lupus to hopefully help other young people like myself in the future.
If children are left untreated, life-changing damage to their body can occur.
But there is good news too. Most treatment is very successful.
Early diagnosis, good treatment and care can help many children to lead a normal life.
I can now enjoy the sports I really like.
Do I ever feel like an outsider? Well, yes, sometimes. For me, I have a condition called arthritis. When I do feel like my arthritis makes me different, I take inspiration from the creativity of others who are seen as outsiders. getting through my injections, I enjoyed singing. So now I'm into my musical theatre and I've been selected to be in Bugsy Malone.
Help us spread the word that kids get rheumatic diseases too.
So that was just an example of what can happen. And you can mobilise a whole, globe by just talking about, and through social media now we've got that as a, as a real benefit for us. So this is another project that I'm currently working on and leading on, and again it's looking at antibiotic resistance, and I was given a small pot of money to work with young people in the form of drama and art to teach other young people about the importance of antimicrobial resistance and the impact it can have on our lives. And this has been a fantastic opportunity where researchers within the university have come together, and children as young as 2 are learning about bacteria and viruses, and they've developed they wrote the play, which we're going to launch it in the next 2 weeks. It will be online, and I'll share it with everyone because it's quite funny. It's got a Scouse humour for those who interested to watch it. But it's been written by the young people. It'll be performed by the young people. It'll be going out into schools in the UK, and all the artwork and educational resources that go with it have been designed by young people. And it's just one way to get the message out there in a fun way, so it's not completely boring. And it generates that discussion, with the young people. It gets them just talking about things that, what we think are important. So I just want to end with, we're looking at Luke, and you're looking at the young people that I work with, and I have a privileged job in working with these young people because they're so inspiring. But we need to listen to them. We need to provide more opportunities for young people to be involved. What we've started in the UK is just the tip of the iceberg. I think we need to build on those models, and we are, but we need to evaluate that. We need to look at the impact. We need to look at how young people are involved throughout the research process, and obviously share that with everyone through our learning. So thank you. That's my granddaughter, by the way, who wants to be a doctor, and that's no influence whatsoever of mine.
Thank you for a nice presentation. The 2 things first. Thank you for using the word gobsmacked. I haven't heard that for a little while. And the second question is, how has this been viewed by the ethics board? Because the ethics boards they're there to ensure that research is conducted ethically. And obviously you've got young people developing some of these materials, and has there been a good relationship with the ethics and the acceptance from them?
Yeah, so going back to when I was saying about it, with the guidance that we produced, if it wasn't accepted by the ethics, then it's just pointless. Yeah. We have to have that working relationship with ethics, because what we found now is when the ethics boards receive a patient information sheet, very similar to the first one that I showed, they will say, you need to go and review this by a young person's advisory group or a patient group that you work with. This is unacceptable, and refer to our guidance that we developed. And the good thing is that the study, the tracker findings, for example, have now backed up what we've said all along. So we've got more evidence to say this is what our young people want. It's not ethical to produce a 20-page information sheet for an 8-year-old. It's not ethical to produce a 20-page information sheet for an adult. So it's took, I'd say, over the last 2 years, it's now accepted that you can't present something like that in an ethics board, but it's took 12 years, 14 years to do that.
Yeah. No,
but you've got to have that working relationship. And my advice is get into the regulators and work with them to deliver training to research ethics committees or researchers, get into their systems, because without that, you're just fighting on your own.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Did you pick 8 because of the ethics board? 8 years old?
No.
Because I know that we've worked with some children, but for our ethics board, we have to go above 8. But we've had younger children that are like 5, kindergarten, and they're already advocating, talking to the principal. They're like the regular kids that just regularly want to make life better. So,
No, the reason why we've done that was for pragmatic reasons, really, because of resource.
okay.
So one member of staff, you know, you can't do, you have to just choose that age limit. But it's something that, again, like I say, you know, that's something that I'd love to develop and work with younger people, younger age groups, because they're just so insightful and enthusiastic. You know, we should be giving them a voice as well.
I don't know if you're the right person. Actually, it's for any of the potential speakers or anybody in the room, but I was at a conference recently about clinical trials, and the outcomes of the clinical trials are really basically to show that it improves patients' feel, function, or survive. And one of the things that struck me is that, especially in considering of the patient engagement conference that we were going to be having, is that those seem to arrive from discussions with the regulatory body and the sponsor, the company, and that there's not a lot of patient engagement. And is that even a space where patient engagement, if we're thinking about how a patient functions, feels, functions, or survives, would that be an appropriate place to start thinking about patient engagement, about those clinical endpoints?
Definitely.
So I'm just kind of throwing it out there, because I'd be curious to know what you or any of the other speakers or anybody in the room would think about that.
I think for me, I suppose it depends on, so I'm funded to do a particular job, and you work with young people throughout the research process, so that's what I'm predominantly funded to do. So as and when other opportunities come in, we just advocate for patients to be around the table, but how that looks in reality is a different matter. So we really struggled to begin with, because we didn't really know who to target. But I don't think we've had to do a recruitment drive since about 2008, because it's a continuous. When you come and do these presentations, or you go to schools, or you go to hospitals, they learn more, and they just publicise the group for you. So it's just an ongoing recruitment that, which can be quite difficult, because you've got new members joining, and it's, you know, that learning process. But what we found is the older ones, so Adit, who was in one of the photographs, who's now gone to university, despite him not living in Liverpool no more, he comes home for the meetings, because one, his family live there and he's going to get fed. But another is he just loves being part, and I think it's the opportunities that he's got, but he's the mentor now for the little ones. He's a mentor, so we've trained him to be a mentor. So it's a fabulous opportunity for them, but we do need to open up more to young people with disabilities, but it's just having the resource, you know, in different groups, ethnic groups, and so on. So it's an ongoing issue for us. That's it.